Is the government's move to shake up the bureaucracy going to make a major change? Will it actually genuinely bring in talent, or will it politicize the bureaucracy? Well, the government's announcement over the weekend saying that it would bring professionals into joint secretary level positions, 10 of them if in fact, is called lateral entry. Normally, India's bureaucrats go through the rigorous process of the UPSC examination, and while this idea has been debated for years, the government has finally acted on it. They say the idea is to bring in fresh talent into the system, but many people do have reservations, including the Congress, which believes the government will use this as a way to bring in people who are politically aligned to them. However, the government says the selection process will actually be transparent. The idea came in from the Niti Aayog. I spoke earlier to the Niti Aayog CEO, Amitabh Kant. Amitabh Kant, thanks a lot for joining us on NDTV today. The government move to allow this lateral entry into these joint secretary levels posts has evoked a huge debate. What would you say are the advantages of this, Mr. Kant?
Niti, we've been trying this out in Niti Aayog for the last 2 years. We've got a large number of people who've made lateral entry here, and our experience here has been extremely good. They bring in a lot of fresh and vibrant ideas. They generate a lot of forward thinking. And, you know, when you merge this together with people who've come from the field, you know, the UPSC entrants go and work into the field. And they've done some remarkable work against all odds in terms of taking the country forward. And they have a lot of unique experience in terms of social schemes being implemented on ground. And when you combine this together, you have a unique combination. And I think there was a need to do this lateral entry. We need to merge and combine the two. And I think it's a very welcome change. This was long overdue in government. I think we needed to change that status quo to get a lot of fresh ideas. The world is moving at a very rapid pace. You have a lot of, huge amount of disruption taking place across the world. Areas of artificial intelligence, blockchain, tremendous amount of unique things happening. And I think the government must be able to tap into all this through lateral change.
Yeah. Mr. Kant, though, are there any minimum qualifications, that are required? Because when you look at the order, all that it says is that individuals working at comparable levels in the private sector, consultancy organizations, MNCs, with a minimum of 15 years experience qualify. But is there a minimum academic qualification or something?
Yeah, I think the important thing is that there has to be a lot of flexibility to allow people to apply to the government. And rightly so, the government has said that comparable levels, because you'll have people with very vast amount of qualification, people with PhD degrees, people with huge amount of field experience, people who've done some unique work across the world and in India. Let them all apply and let that shortlisting be done. The important thing is to do the process in a very transparent, very competitive manner. The selection must be very merit-based, and that's why the government has put this out, all this in a public domain. So I don't think we should be very rigid about this. I think you'll get people with a lot of qualifications. You'll get people with doctorates, people with postdoctoral work, people who've done some unique work in the field, people who've done a huge amount of work in the private sector, people who've done work in international organizations, people who've done work in NGOs. All that expertise and knowledge, we should allow that to come in and let that shortlisting be done by a professional committee.
Well, what happens, Mr. Kant, though, to the sanctity of the UPSC exam, which is actually a pretty rigorous exam?
No, the UPSC examination continues. I think it's a very, very rigorous, very professionally conducted examination. And we do the selection over, I mean, there are 450 odd posts of joint secretaries. Everyone comes through the process of UPSC, but there are a number of people who don't either sit for UPSC or who've gone and done different kind of things at different, at that particular point of time, they've either gone and done an MBA, or they've gone and done a PhD abroad, or they've gone to MIT or Harvard or Princeton, or they've gone to Ahmedabad, or they've gone and done different things. They've done their own businesses or joined the private sector. Why should government not tap into that energy? Why should government not tap into that knowledge? Why should government not tap into that expertise on a later date? So UPSC continues. So out of 450 plus posts of joint secretaries, if we allow lateral entry in at this stage of 10 joint secretaries, I think it'll bring in a lot of good ideas and generate a lot of there'll be a lot of vibrancy. And I mean, this has actually been happening quite a bit. I mean, if you look at even at the secretary level, if you look at the Secretary Water Resources, he was brought in, he was working with the World Bank and was brought in Param Iyer. Or if you look at the new National Health Protection Scheme, Indu Bhushan, who's been brought in to head that, has huge experience of health, but he was working with the Asian Development Bank, and he's been brought in. And this is a lateral entry into government. I remember a long time back, when I was a young officer, very young officer in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Rakesh Mohan then used to be the economic advisor, and we used to sit in his room and learn a lot from him. So government has for years been doing this lateral entry.
Well,
I mean,
that's true. But Mr. Kant, there has been some concern in some quarters that doing this would allow the government to hire ideologically like-minded people. You have critics of the BJP, for instance, like the Congress's PL Punya, who has said that this was a way to sabotage the system, that the RSS and some corporates, as he put it, can then influence the government directly from inside. What would you say to those people who have raised these concerns?
No, I said this, that important thing is that government has gone about it in a very transparent manner. It has put this advertisement out in public domain. The process must be very transparent. It must be merit-based selection. It must be very competitive. And I'm quite sure, I'm absolutely sure, the government will follow a very transparent process, merit-based. And you'll get some of the finest people in the world to be selected to come and work for Government of India. And I think they will all add, and I'm absolutely sure that the process will be very unique. And you will see these people will make a huge contribution to Government of India in the days to come.
Mr. Kant, right now it's 10 joint secretary level posts. I think the question is this going to be expanded if it works? And is this a step towards a committed bureaucracy?
No, it's not a step towards committed bureaucracy at all. Nidhi, you're totally off the mark. I think it's a step in the right direction. It's a step to bring in professionalism. It's a step to bring in great new young ideas. And it's important that actually we do this at the directors level. We need many more directors. There's a huge vacuum. There's a large vacancy of people at the directors level. And let me tell you that based on my own experience of Niti Aayog has been greatly enriched by bringing in lateral entry. I think we've combined experience of the ground by officers coming in from the field level and that of young people coming in. We have a huge number of lateral entry and a lot of young professionals here. They've contributed to making Niti a very vibrant, dynamic and a very lively organization. And that's what Government of India must be all about. The status quo must be changed. There must be many more risks to be taken, and that will happen if we have people with field experience and those who come with different kind of backgrounds all working together to create a dynamic India.
Mr. Amitabh Kant, thanks very much for joining us. Thank you. Well, that was our interview with the Niti Aayog CEO earlier. Well, lots to talk about. This debate isn't quite over yet. Joining us here in the studio, we have Ajay Dua, who's a former bureaucrat, Amitabh Pandey, who's retired from the IAS and has some very strong views on this. Shivam Vij is a contributing editor with The Print. Samir Saran, the president of the Observer Research Foundation, joins us from Delhi tonight, as does Pawan Khera of the Congress. Amitabh Pandey, to you first. I know you were a little skeptical about this, or maybe more than a little. After hearing what Amitabh Kant has to say, have you changed your mind?
Not at all. In fact, my skepticism is now
peaked,
further confirmed.
Why is that?
Well, first of all, the question which you raise, that of eliminating the UPSC. You know, the UPSC is the constitutionally mandated body for recruitment to all civil posts in the government. Now, taking these posts out of the purview of the UPSC is a very bad precedent. First of all, it's constitutionally questionable. Two, it is, whenever it has been done for specific posts which are identified as requiring the kind of expertise which the UPSC would be unable to access. So only those posts which have been taken out of the purview of the UPSC, if ever, and that too through a very formal process of regulation, because the Constitution specifies how posts can be taken out of the purview of the UPSC. Now, I don't know what the process here has been followed. It appears that these posts have been taken out. One doesn't really know how they have been taken out. And if so, what is the motivation behind taking them out of the purview of the UPSC, except to maintain the kind of flexibility which Amitabh Kant referred to. In fact, what does flexibility mean here? First, you have educational qualifications which you list, which are so broad, so wide that anyone, anything, without going through the rigors of a competitive examination process, a mere graduate with 15 years of experience and working at comparable levels. Now, what are comparable levels to that?
It's too vague, you mean?
Today, I mean, it's difficult to establish. And then who will establish this? Who will establish?
Plenty of people who are bright who don't go through competitive exams and mere graduates.
Who is going to determine?
Like many of us, we're all right with, you know, they might not be so bad.
See, when you require, you're looking for specialists and you're looking for domain expertise, then first you try and tailor the educational qualifications in a way that reflects that domain expertise. You do not have generalist qualifications for accessing domain expertise.
So you've brought up two issues, and let me take those points to Mr. Dua here. Mr. Dua, one concern, of course, you heard Mr. Pandey raise there was about the examination, and secondly, on the sort of vague definition of what, you know, the educational qualifications will be. How do you see this? I mean, do you see this as becoming a problem, or do you think this is a radical idea which is worth a shot?
Let me just give me a moment to put this in a little bit of a perspective. The post of a joint secretary in the government of India is not what's called a cadre post for any service, whether it's the Indian Administrative Service or any of the central services. There are 29 of them for which the civil services exam is held collectively. All these officers from central services and the IAS, to which I have belonged for 40 years almost, we have come here only on deputation. Not one of these posts is assigned to any of these 29 services plus the all India or 3 All India services, the IAS, IPS and the Indian Forest Service. And that's number one. So it's not a matter of right, or nothing is being violated if the government gets these posts filled up from people outside.
You're saying they're well within their rights to do that.
Absolutely. That's number one in terms of the legality of the issue. Second is the issue about, is it the first time that's happening? No. I can remember at least for 45 years, people like Lavraj Kumar, thereafter Dr. Manmohan Singh himself, the V. Krishnamurthy, who headed SAIL, BHEL, became the Secretary for Ministry of Heavy Industries, D.V. Kapoor, who became Secretary for Power, and others. They were stalwarts in this civil service, not necessarily civil service, meaning IAS, in public service, who have been recruited over the years at different levels. Third is the question that why has this now become suddenly an issue for discussion with political views also being voiced? It is because probably for the first time 10 people at a particular level are being recruited together at the same
rather than the odd appointment here,
odd person here and there.
Okay, so let me take what you said to Pawan Khera, because the Congress has expressed so much reservation about this. Pawan, why? I mean, why is that? You know, Mr. Dua gave Manmohan Singh's example. What is wrong with bringing in talent from outside? And if it's transparent, if the process is transparent, as Mr. Kant says it will be, then you know, people will be held accountable.
Mr. Kant gave examples of Indu Bhushan and Param Iyer. He forgot conveniently to mention that both belonged to the IAS first and then left the IAS, and now they have been taken back in the government. Mr. Dua is giving the example of Dr. Manmohan Singh. I am sorry, Dr. Manmohan Singh was first appointed as advisor, then appointed as secretary, not as joint secretary. We have no problem if you hire talent like Dr. Manmohan Singh, or for example Swaminathan, who was taken as Secretary Agriculture, or Mr. Shahi, who was taken as Secretary Power, or D.N. Ghosh. I have examples galore. I have also worked in the government, so I know what I am talking about. Our problem is, you have 10 months more to go. You advertise something without specifying what will be the selection committee like. You are hiring people at the level of JS and not secretary. Nobody had any objection to the names of Dr. Manmohan Singh, Montek Ahluwalia, D.N. Ghosh, Shahi, or the other person I mentioned. Nobody had any problem to these names because Swaminathan, they were known as domain experts. They had very good, for example, if you bring in Kailash Satyarthi as Secretary Child Welfare, we won't object. Who will object? He has domain expert. But you're bringing people at the level of JS without having had the experience which only the field can give, or the depth of the experience, the width of the experience. You incentivize doctors who go and work in the rural areas and give them promotions. Here you are disincentivizing those IAS officers who've slogged themselves in rural areas as SDMs, as DCs, and you are rewarding people who have no experience of the country as large as India. So there is a huge difference in what we were talking about when we spoke about secretaries to Government of India and now JSs.
Okay. Let me take what you said to Samir Saran, because Samir, you expressed, you felt in what you tweeted earlier today that this was a good move by the government. But can I ask you honestly, if you see any pitfalls in this, some of the concerns that have been raised by people like Amitabh Pandey and even Pawan Khera this evening, do you see any pitfalls here?
Nidhi, I think all the three speakers who've spoken before me are extremely eminent, and it's not fit for me to really comment on this IAS debate. But let me just make three short points and try and also bring the what worries me into the picture. The first, of course, is that as we move from $2.5 trillion today to $10 trillion in 20 years' time, the size of the Indian economy and the size of the Indian governance architecture will not move at the same speed. It is impossible to build institutions in 20 years. It's possible to grow economies 4 times in the same period. So we will have to find creative avenues for bringing in competence and capabilities to respond to the highly complex times we live in. Mr. Kant mentioned technology as a frontier sector, which neither follows the paths of the typical industries which required PhDs and degrees of years of experience. You have 24-year-olds who create multi-billion-dollar enterprises. So a 35, 40-year-old man would probably be very capable to respond to some of the cyber security challenges.
Or woman. So
I think as our economic size and economic footprint and diplomatic endeavors increase, we will need to bring in new talent. I think that is where I think we have to be careful. We have to be very careful in terms of the areas we select where outside talent needs to be recruited. And I think if those sectors are wisely selected and we bring in mid-level functionaries to build institutional capabilities, I think there should be no objection. That's the first point I want to make. The second, of course, is the second point I want to make is that there is a fear in the current establishment that India will only have 450 joint secretaries going forward. I think there are going to be many more avenues where we will have many more functionaries needed as we become a far more expansive international actor, and certainly as we start doing more work in many areas that we currently only superficially address. And I think there will be more posts created. So I think this outside talent is not necessarily parasitic on what is available to the current cadres. They are going to be complementary force to supplement what we have through the UPSC process. And finally, I think there is also a fear about political favoritism or ideology or leanings that might be embedded in these hires. Well, let me tell you, most of the people we have hired, even at the level of the secretary, many of them who have been named, eventually did join political parties and did have political preferences. So I think the regime at that time, if they are making these appointments, are likely to hire people who correspond to their preference.
Okay, well that's actually true. That's actually quite true. You've actually raised an important point though. No, Samir, you raised an important point. I'll take that to Shivam. A, that it's important to identify the specific areas you want to hire outsiders, to. But more than anything else, Shivam, the important thing will be how transparent the process actually is, who is going to be part of the selection committee, how is this actually going to work? Isn't that what it's about?
And I think that's really important to ensure the transparency and credibility of the process, because if it is not transparent and credible, if after the appointments we have more controversies and we have to discuss this issue for 5 more left, right centers, then I think what will happen is that the idea will be killed forever. Because in future, no government, whether it's led by BJP or another party, will be able to do it again. The idea will be thrown out, the baby will be thrown out in the bathwater. And I think the idea is very important. It seems like a very big thing. It's actually a drop in the ocean. The Indian bureaucracy is broken at all levels, from central ministries right down to the village level. Why? Not because of the fault of bureaucrats, but because, in February this year, the government itself told the Lok Sabha the shortage of 1,500 IS officers. There's a huge shortage of manpower, and then there's a talent crunch issue. So both these problems have to be solved. I think this is a great move. I think lateral entry is needed, but how it will be done, fine. Even if you pick up somebody who is ideologically, close to you, even then, is he competent? Was somebody more competent overlooked because he was not ideologically favorable to you? Those are questions that will be asked. I think the reservations made by Pawan Kheda are important. I think, but note that even Pawan Kheda is not opposing the idea per se. I think most people, I don't know about Amitabh ji, but most people are not opposing the idea. It's the process, it's the credibility. If they want a joint secretary for INB ministry and Nidhi Rajdan applies, will they give her the job, or will they favor me? I think Nidhi is definitely more.
Current INB ministry would love to hire me.